Chapter 16. On the Steps of the Palace. August had thought Father was exaggerating. Everyone he had thought meant every noble from Charmant and nearby kingdoms, every courtier, or every eligible young woman who was already in the royal city. He had thought he had a handle on Father's hyperbolic practices. He was wrong. Grand, August muttered to the Grand Duke. When he said everyone, did you not say, no, we can't possibly fit them all in the building, and if you didn't, why not? You know how he gets, Your Highness. The Grand Duke brought his hands before his chest and tapped his fingers together. He's lonely, and you're rarely home. I did suggest letting you get married at your own pace, but he was insistent. He's always insistent, said August. They were both safely hidden from the near 1,000 crowded into the hall by a large curtain. August had been introduced to people before. He had spoken to crowds he didn't know and groups he did. He had addressed the court at least once a month on topics he sometimes got only a 10-minute brief on. He was used to being in front of people. Don't tell me I'm to be introduced to all these people. The visiting nobles, of course, and then any of the Charmant nobility and gentry, said the Grand Duke. I'm to fall in love with only the use of the phrase, nice to meet you, am I? Asked August, narrowing his eyes at the man. The Grand Duke dropped the curtain back into place, monocle glinting as he laughed. That would be most convenient for us all, Your Highness. August groaned. At least everyone who wouldn't usually have been invited would have a good night. Father had followed through on all encompassing invitation and ensured there would be enough food on the tables for anyone who might wander in. Someone deserves to have fun, he muttered. The Grand Duke took off his monocle. Did you say something, Your Highness? I dare not, he said flatly, when I'll be introducing myself for the next 10 hours. Don't worry. We shall let you sit once it's the gentry's turn. August smoothed down his coat and forced his smile a few times until it didn't feel fake. The Grand Duke scurried off to hopefully temper Father's fury at August's lack of interest in the ball. From the sounds of it, most of the people present were there for the spectacle of witnessing the prince to pick a bride. He shuddered. There was a particular horror to knowing your every move was being noted. Soon enough, a herald bustled out through the curtains and began announcing him. The curtain rose. He emerged and bowed, and the ball began. Princess Frederica Eugene de la Fonte, cried the herald. A lovely young woman whom August had met many times approached, her aquamarine gown pooling as she curtsied and retreated. They didn't need to be introduced. They had already rejected their parents' attempts at setting them up twice. Not even a minute later, the herald announced Mademoiselle Augustina de Bois, the daughter of General Pierre de Bois. It was going to be a long night. August hated how the young women became a blur. This was absurd. He remembered half of them only because they had met before. He bowed and smiled, making a face at the few of them he knew well enough to laugh with over the situation, and glanced toward the far balcony. One of his great-great-grandfathers had been in love with opera, and this hall had been meant for showcasing Charmant's rising talents. Now, though, his father sat in the box watching him. His pale gold suit with shiny buttons made him resemble a stout pearl in a cracked open oyster, the red banner of Charmant in lolling tongue. Mademoiselle Leonora Mercedes de la Tour, daughter of Colonel and Madame de la Tour. The ball was getting to him. Oysters didn't have tongues. August bowed. She had a kind smile, but they had never spoken. There was no connection, no shared intimacy. He didn't know her history or what she wanted to make of her future and Charmant's future, but they could learn that about each other. Not in the 10 seconds they had, though. August winked at Leonora, not entirely appropriate, but she looked as exasperated as he felt, and glanced up at his father, yawning. His father turned as red as the nearby banner. and August made out his epaulets bouncing as he raged. Served him right. The next young lady approached him, and then the next. He knew far fewer of the ones in line after them. He wanted to be in love, but it felt as if something in him were already missing, as if a physician with careful hands had cracked open his chest and cut out his heart before stitching him up. His heart was beating, but it felt hollow and distant, like his chance at love had already run away with it. He straightened up from what must have been his 50th bow and glared at the father. The ball was making him melancholy when he should have been questioning Natalie. The Mademoiselles, Drizella and Anastasia Tremaine, announced the herald, daughters of Lady Tremaine. August groaned. That meant they were only partway through the gentry. Lady Tremaine's daughters were pretty, but the colors they wore didn't suit them. Drizella's complexion would have been better served by an emerald, not chartreuse, gown, and Anastasia's less embellished magenta dress, clearly less expensive than her sister's, washed out her paler looks and red hair. Anastasia bent down to adjust her skirts and caught her sister's dress beneath her heel, and Drizella pouted. He had briefly met the red-headed one, Anastasia, before. She had at least been somewhat kind to Oliver and told August and Martin about her mother's meeting with the Baron. They did not appear to be from a family experiencing financial troubles, but one with money to spare. The girls dashed forward. There was a lack of care and regard in the way they acted toward him and everyone else. Even if their introduction had gone perfectly tonight, he wasn't sure he would be able to get over how they and their mother had treated Oliver. He had no desire to be related to Lady Tremaine either, especially since he'd learned that her position as Natalie's landlord gave Natalie a reason to protect her. Lady Tremaine could be more wrapped up in this memory loss scheme than he had originally thought. Perhaps he could speak with her before confronting Natalie. He looked at the father as he bowed, and the old man frowned. Good. At least they agreed upon this. Now, if only this procession of pointlessness could be over. He watched the Grand Duke make the mistake of riling father up, probably with an "I told you so" to accompany the monocle flicking, and father buried his head in his hands. A glint like glass caught his eyes. At the back of the ballroom glided a young woman. She was alone, eyes so wide that he could tell how sky blue they were from across the room. She spun to take in the palace, pale blue dress swirling around her legs like waves, and he caught a glimpse of her wide, pleased smile. Her joy lit the room like a star. He couldn't recall the last time he had been that happy. August broke protocol, stepped down from his place, and quickly made his way to her. Maybe he could find what he was missing.